Okay, so here today we have from Eclipse Foundation, we have Paul Bach here, Wayne Beaton, and myself. Sorry.
Right to you.
And then me, it's Tanya Obradovic, and you may have seen some emails from me lately and the invite for this call. So we'll try from our end to provide update, but we also have people from the community helping us out. So you probably saw Ivar, who is, Ivar, are you here as well on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. So Ivar will be helping out with some plans with regards to Jakarta EE9, and then we'll provide a marketing update. Neil, I'm not sure if you can do the marketing update, or if not, we'll just give the update from the notes from Mike DeNicola, who was not able to attend today. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, if you can just do it from the notes, that'd be great.
Okay, fantastic. So without further ado, let's start. Please feel free to kind of be interactive and interrupt us with questions. However, we did allocate time for questions and answers at the end as well. So we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. So starting up, okay. Oh, sure. I'll go into a presentation mode. Just give me a second. Okay. Do you want to take over from here?
Thank you, Tanya, and I'll walk through the first section here and get the call going. So we're getting closer to Jakarta EE at Eclipse. I think last time we were together, we had the good news with regards to recognizing that Eclipse glassfish 5.1 had been delivered, and that was Java EE8 certified. As we're driving now towards Jakarta EE8 within the community, there's a lot of work underway, and it's a lot of important work that's being done within the community to fully move Java EE into Jakarta EE. So exciting times, and in parallel as well, we're looking at as a community mapping up on our planning efforts for EE9, and Ivar will get into more detail on that later on in the presentation. Okay, cool. All right, so next slide, Tanya. All right, the pillars of, we call these the pillars of work, and they're really initiatives that are being driven out within the community in order to get us to the full delivery of EE8 and the transfer of Java EE into the Eclipse Foundation. You know, the foundation is actively working with Oracle on some of the supporting agreements, so that work continues. Within the community, we've got work on specs that's bringing the Java EE specs into Jakarta to become Jakarta EE specs. And what's guiding that is the Jakarta EE spec process that is currently being worked on within the spec community, and Wayne Beaton will give us a little update on that in his section. So very important work with regards to having specifications for an IP lock-in perspective, as well as a basis for future innovation in Jakarta. You know, what's always been fundamental to Java has been TCKs and test compatibility kits, and with the TCK for Jakarta, that was.
I'm sorry, there is some background noise. If you can go on mute, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, or maybe the audio wasn't good.
Can you hear us well?
Yeah, I can hear you guys fine.
Okay, great.
Okay. Was there a question?
Not from myself.
Okay, cool. So within the TCK front, the TCK, of course, is what is contributed and is hosted at Eclipse. Work is underway on the process side of it, so that Jakarta has a TCK process that will explain how the TCK is run and how certification is achieved. So that pillar is being actively worked on. And in conjunction with that, and the spec one is really formalizing the approach for declaring a spec final. Where do you find it? How's it labeled? TCKs and so on. It's an important set of details that we need clarity on. So we've surfaced it up as a pillar to make sure that it gets all the attention that's needed in order to make sure that those that want to head down the path of certification really understand clearly how to get it done. Now, on the compatible implementation front, that's really running the TCK, which maps onto the specifications. That work is actually getting underway because the TCK is at Eclipse, and as we drive towards Jakarta EE 8 certification, we do expect to see Eclipse Glassfish, Open Liberty, Payer Server, Wildfly, and Tom E. Achieve certification at some point once the specs have are declared final. So that'll be exciting. And conjunction with that, of course, are the marketing aspects. And we're looking to the marketing committee to really formalize the logo usage guidelines, so that we've got clarity on how to selling ship logo. And so on, as well as PR activities that will support Jakarta EE 8. So in a coordinated way within the community, these efforts, these initiatives are moving along, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, moving along in parallel with Jakarta EE 9 in the early split phases to get clarity on where it's going next. All right, so how can you help? And this really is an initiative that's owned and driven within the Jakarta EE community. So it is essential that you do help and you do get involved. Part of what's important are the agreements that underpin what we do. The membership contributor committee agreement, the work group participation agreement. These agreements need to get executed so that we've got the right underlying governance to the project. So if you do have questions, reach out to the foundation. We can help with the agreement, understanding and where you're at and what needs to get done. It's part of the spec process that Wayne will get into next. We will be doing restructuring reviews for the specifications. The PMC will be fully engaged in owning and driving and helping get that work done within the spec projects that will be created out of the existing projects. Again, more details to follow. Part of that will be renaming to Jakarta names, and all that will get work and be part of the process that we'll be fully implementing in order to get the Jakarta EE 8 spec documents done. Next slide. All right, and what project wouldn't be complete without a Kanban board? So there is a project board in GitHub that's been assembled by the community to organize the work, as well as in a left to right fashion, spell out what needs to get done in order for us to evolve the existing projects into spec projects. So next slide. And staying connected in always important. So do make time for these community engagement opportunities. We'd love your input on what's working, contributions to these sessions and these opportunities to blog and spread the good word of what we're doing within Jakarta EE. So get involved, be engaged, and of course the mailing lists are a great place to ask questions and find out more as well.
If I may just add a reminder, tomorrow we're having another Jakarta Tech Talk. So please join that. I did see quite a bit of interest, so it will be great to see you there as well. I also want to point out that if you want to sign up for a talk or suggest a talk, we created a spreadsheet so we can hear from you and become more interactive. Please blog, and particularly I want to draw your attention on blogging with regards to your involvement with Jakarta EE. We do expect in the next little while the community is going to be become more engaged, so we would love to hear about your involvement.
Thank you, Tanya. All right, over to Wayne Beaton into the
Do you want me to
spec portion.
If you could drive, no, if you could just continue driving, that would be great.
Sure.
So I actually do hear some typing. Could everyone, if you're not preparing to ask a question or join in the conversation, can you just please mute? Thank you. Oh, that sounds way better. Okay, carry on, please. All right, next slide. Good. So in the last month, I guess, we pushed out a new version of the Eclipse Foundation specification process. Like any new process that we create, we tend to rapidly evolve it as we discover deficiencies. So we noticed a couple of things that needed to be addressed, and we worked on that. The Eclipse Foundation specification process is not strictly owned by not at all owned by the Jakarta EE working group or the specification committee of that working group, but they have been instrumental in assembling it, and their input into this process has been very valuable. As we move forward and roll out the specification process to other groups, will engage with a wider community to evolve it further. But again, to this point, the Jakarta EE Specification Committee has been fantastic in their help with this. We made a few minor language clarifications. I say minor, but because I knew what I meant when I typed the words. So we made added some language to make it so that other people would better know what I meant. And we spent some energy to really call out all the different sorts of releases and the sorts of engagement that are required for each of the types of releases. Now, major and minor release, if you look at the document, you'll notice that we group those together. Really, those have meaning more to the individual. They're really no different as far as the process is concerned. Generally, we take a similar notion, or at least in my mind, we take a similar notion to how semantic versioning works. A major release may involve API breakage. A minor release is additions. A service release is errata or bug fixes, that sort of thing. Anyway, from a process point of view, service releases are different from major and minor releases. We also formalized more what the specification committee's ballot process looks like. In the previous version, we basically stated that approval was required, and in this version, we qualified what the approval process actually looks like in terms of a duration of how long a ballot takes place and whatnot. There is of course, a Kanban board, a project board in GitHub that it's now closed. But if you're interested in seeing specific details and discussion related to the changes, there's a URL at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. I thought I would just take a run at describing the relationship between some of these process documents, and kind of an interesting twist. Tanya and I both had the same problem with this document, and ultimately I decided to go with this. I've actually attempted to draw it in a UML sort of fashion, and we both observed that I did it upside down. But anyway, the development process is kind of the root, or the super document that guides the manner by which development is done at the Eclipse Foundation. That defines our open source rules of engagement, openness, transparency, vendor neutrality, meritocracy driven responsibilities, that sort of thing. It defines what a committer is, what a project is, project leads, committers, sorry, I said committers twice, PMCs, because committers are super important. Our whole release process and how we do reviews, that's all described by the Eclipse development process. The Eclipse Foundation specification process builds on that to provide some guidance regarding how specification projects work, their life cycle, how the specification committee interacts with the process, specifically in terms of how they do their approval process through a balloting process. But fundamentally, the Eclipse Foundation specification process is set up to manage the intellectual property flows that occur around specifications, right? So most of basically everything that's in that document is about ensuring intellectual property flow is managed properly. Now, that is kind of generally how specification work is done at the Eclipse Foundation. It is possible, and in fact, it's actually possible for top-level projects to customize how the Eclipse development process is engaged in. When we set this up, we knew that different working groups were going to have different requirements, slightly different requirements. So the Eclipse Foundation specification process provides the baseline. Kind of this is what must be done to do specification work at a minimum. And then it permits for different working groups, Jakarta EE working group, to tune or customize or specialize the process. So in this case, the Jakarta EE specification process, we've been working with the specification committee, and most of the customizations are around the timing of when we do reviews, when we run specification committee ballots, how long those ballots will run for. So it's kind of just sort of tuning, kind of increasing a couple of time periods to make sure that the various stakeholders have sufficient time to review content before approving a review, for example. Next slide, please. In terms of where we are in the process of engaging in real specification work at the Eclipse Foundation with the Jakarta EE, we have a bunch of projects that have API code. And right now, all of the projects that are engaged in that sort of work are just regular old Eclipse projects. Open source projects that are basically subject to the Eclipse development process. And what we need to do is convert those into specification projects so that they can engage in real specification work. To do that, we need to have this Jakarta EE specification process nailed down, and I'm hopeful that we're getting close to that. We need to have the various committers engaged in the projects to be covered by the necessary paperwork, which I think we talked about elsewhere. And we need to have scope statements for the various specifications. Now, the scope defines the boundaries under which by which the project team will operate, kind of the range of functionality that the specification project will define. For example, this was considered a strong requirement as part of managing the intellectual property flows. So we need this before we can move forward, and that was the Kanban board that Paul presented earlier. And we're inviting everybody, project teams, project leads in particular, to engage in that process. And we're going to start doing that. Just for example, and also a piece of this, and that we believe we have this piece sorted, is we're going to actually rename some of these projects. So I've got an example here, what we currently call the Eclipse project for Servlet, which was always intended as a placeholder name. We're going to move forward with a project named Jakarta Servlet. Again, just an example of one of the projects. Next slide. This next slide is really just a summary of some of the things that have already been stated. Project scope. There's project scopes. We'll also have a specification scope. There was a question?
Yeah, Wayne, this is Jesse McConnell. About the previous slide.
Yep.
What's being done with the existing projects that have already released artifacts and stuff into Maven Central outside of all of these process specifications and all that kind of stuff? Is there no more of that until these things are locked in, or is it just sort of the Wild West still?
Well, it shouldn't be a Wild West.
Because there's a lot of artifacts that have been released into Maven Central, and like the Servlet one, that sort of happened out of nowhere.
Okay, so maybe we can talk details about that offline, Jesse, and maybe report back to the group. But so right now, the intention is to take the existing projects and convert them into specification projects, and then implement a proper specification process. As part of the release of Glassfish 5.1, we did engage in a process of taking the content that has been contributed to date and pushing that out to Maven Central in a kind of like in the Jakarta group. But there, again, I'm curious, and again, I'm not sure I want to explore that right now. I'm curious to understand how you mean Wild West, and and I will contact you after the call.
Well, I talked to you about that, or I sent you a mail on that quite some time ago. I'm just wondering whether or not we expect to see any more of that kind of behavior, or is the process in place now that those kinds of things are not going to happen anymore?
So like
the Glassfish thing you were referring to, I guess.
Sure. Now, their project teams are currently governed by the Eclipse development process. So if they are making releases, they are subject to that. So a release needs to be covered by a review of some form. If they're doing service releases, that's just part of the process.
Okay.
As I recall, one of the challenges was, as we were doing this bootstrapping process, the responsibilities within the projects were not entirely clear or enforced, and we need to tighten that up as we move forward. Thank you for your question. Sorry if I punted too much. For the scopes, projects have a scope. So the project scope will be, for example, to implement to write the specification document, implement or provide an API and possibly a TCK. So individual projects may implement some subset of those things, and that can be a future-looking statement as well. Even if the TCK is not currently part of a project, it could be, at some point in the future, it's in scope. The specifications themselves also need a description. So, picking on Servlet, I can say that the Jakarta Servlet project implements the document, the API and the TCK, and then a description of what the Servlet specification is. I went through an exercise of trying to actually sort that out, and it turns out it was more difficult than I had hoped, but not impossible. Anyway, that's something we need to work with the PMC and the specification committee are going to have to actively participate in that process. And then I listed some paperwork here, but again, I believe that's been discussed earlier. So with that, I'm actually done with what I wanted to present about specifications. Is there any other questions? I'm happy to answer. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Thanks. I think, Ivar, if you are ready, we can move to you, and then you can share your screen and present if you wanted to share anything.
Sure. Just see. I'll just get it right there.
And I will mute us so that we don't interrupt.
Okay, can you hear me? So I'll talk about the, I know the agenda says Jakarta EE9, but I'm not sure if we've agreed on the version number yet, so I'm calling next. What I've created there on GitHub, I'll show the GitHub page afterwards. It's also that we started a little bit for just defining activities for how to get started with the roadmap for the next releases. And that is done in the Jakarta EE platform project on the Eclipse E4J GitHub, where we have these project boards. What we also started here is to gather issues for how do you want this platform to evolve. So here we ask the community to just contribute. Everybody can create an issue here. So just get it in there, and then we can prioritize and discuss it and see how we go with it. We also earlier had the before Code 1 last year with the Jakarta community voices, where a lot of people has contributed to what they see is important for the future versions of the platform. So of course we will look at this and take these things into the GitHub so we can have some tracking of the issues, so we don't lose anything. There are also people in the community writing blogs about this, and we're trying to keep track, like Arjun's blog here from Hoyara, with where he lists all the specifications he's involved in and how he see they will evolve. So all of this work is ongoing. It's kind of we're gathering all these sources of information and trying to get it into this Jakarta platform project on GitHub, so we can get all the issues in there, and then we can distribute them to the different projects. To stay update on all of this, I encourage you to join the platform mailing list. So that's the Jakarta platform dev at eclipse.org. Also look at the project home for the platform project, and of course also follow the project on GitHub. So that's more or less where we are at the planning of Jakarta EE next, or 9, or whatever version it's going to be. So that was what I had planned to say. Any questions? Comments?
Okay, thank you, Ivar. So let me jump into the marketing update, if that's okay. I will share email from Mike DeNicola and then go through that. Just give me a second here. And I will put it all the material available to you guys after the call. So just a little bit on the marketing committee. So we don't have the chair at this point, and you know the committee is managing that through rotating into the role on a monthly basis. We are meeting twice a month, and that is actually relatively new. Starting in February, we started with this cadence. Previously, we were meeting on the weekly basis. So where we're at is right now we're looking into the approving Jakarta EE members and compatibility logos and determining, the guy. We're trying to determine also the how to use those and create the documents as well. The logos, however, we will be voting on them finally. Actually, that's tomorrow, March 28th, right? So we will share that with the community. I do believe the community, at least the larger, or everyone who is signed up on the working group distribution mailing list, was consulted on these as well. We are planning a couple of different events around Jakarta EE. One of them was Jakarta Summit, and we are still working towards that, but tying it very closely to the Jakarta EE8 release. So depending on the plans for Jakarta EE8 and specific dates for release date, we're going to pick up and talk about Jakarta Summit. We're also going to, so there is work being done with regards on reviewing the Jakarta 2019 budget. I think, well, we had the vote actually yesterday within the steering committee, and that was approved. So we're going to acknowledge that on the upcoming marketing meeting tomorrow. We have done tons of updates on the Jakarta EE website. If you go and look at there, you will see the blogs, you will see the resources page, and of course you are going to see Jakarta EE developer survey that we just closed yesterday, and I'm really hopeful that all of you had a chance to participate and let us know, you know, how your organization are planning to participate and use Jakarta EE going forward. We had over 1,700 responses, and yeah, that's my name right there. I will give the information about survey results, but I didn't have a chance to look at it yet. So I will definitely provide that information as soon as I have it. So that is what we have from the marketing summary. But, you know, I would love to open at this point for your comments, questions, concerns, because we certainly believe there are quite a few. Also, I do want to remind that we don't need just this meeting to hear.
Morgen, ja.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, that seemed to be unintentional.
Could everybody please mute if you're not to speak?
And I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So did you say that the proposed budget was approved yesterday?
Yes, so we had, the budget was reviewed.
This morning.
Okay, let me just try to,
You're the host, you can mute.
let me try to mute everyone, and then please, hold on, mute all. So I will mute everyone, and then unmute yourselves for the questions.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Tanya, can you hear me? I cannot hear you, Tanya. I think you unmuted
I
yourself.
think she's unmuted as well. So.
We muted ourselves. Hello.
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Sorry. So I just wanted to understand. So the proposal for the marketing budget was reviewed yesterday, but not approved.
No. It was approved.
Okay, all right.
So it was. So everything's good.
Okay, and can we? I guess we'll be reviewing that tomorrow. The
Sure.
marketing call. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. More questions?
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just I'm hearing some noise and in the plugs.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question. Can you tell? Can you go again a little bit into the details of the roadmap?
Sure. I think Ivar, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Do you mean a roadmap for the entire thing? That first the EE8 version and then the EE9, or do you mean details about the EE9?
Well, correct. The entire yes, the general roadmap for what for planning.
Okay, so Tanya, if you can show the slide.
Yes, I will. I'm just looking for it.
With glass fiction and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I need to share my entire screen. So just give me a second. And I will be glad to do that. Okay, so going back to the beginning of the presentation. Sorry for looking into There we go. Oop, too much.
So this is what you mean?
Is that what you mean?
Yes, I have a question here.
Yes, please.
Could you go a little bit into details? You have described already, but maybe is it clear that Jakarta EE8 will be exactly have the same technologies like Java EE8?
Okay, so the intention is that we will take the existing specifications as they were released for when we did it in January, when we did the Eclipse Glassfish Python 1 release. Then we also released all the APIs. And what we'll do is actually use the same tag or branch and just update the version numbers, do the renaming, and potentially some XML namespaces or URLs. So we'll keep the changes as minimal as possible. So the intention is that it will be more or less exactly the same. We have opened up though for some small bug fixes if the project teams are able to do that, but we'll try to limit it. So we will have no new functionality and no breaking changes.
Okay, good. Thank you. The Eclipse Glassfish for Jakarta EE9, do you have a roadmap for this, when this will be released?
That hasn't been set up yet, but I'm pretty sure, I think it's Dimitri will be in charge of this, as he was with the Eclipse Glassfish Python 1, and he will set up a similar project board on GitHub so we can follow the status there as soon as he's got around to it. But kind of the thing that we have to wait for until we can even start that is to get the specification process defined and also the trademark agreements signed.
Yeah, so while that is in work, in parallel, we can proceed with some of the work and that's where the community can get engaged, providing that the spec process, which we're wrapping up hopefully very shortly, and the paperwork from the committers is done, right? Then we can start some work in the parallel while we're still working on finalizing our trade agreements and working towards getting the specification documents into our specification projects.
So,
Does that
Eva,
answer your question? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I see that the similar question is also posted on the chat, that what is the target date for Glassfish 5.2 and Jakarta EE 8, and we cannot give a date yet, but as soon as we can, we will.
the 29 January 19th, that already passed, obviously. So you
Right.
guys, at this point, you have no guesstimate of that 5.2 Jakarta EE 8.
So for clarity, January 29th was when Eclipse Glassfish 5.1 delivered.
Mhm.
And as Eva pointed out, we're not at the point now, the community is not at the point now to communicate a date for Jakarta EE 8 or Glassfish 5.2. But there's a lot of work going on that's moving us towards that objective.
But are we talking years or months?
No, we're definitely not talking years, but at the same time, we cannot, we don't want to overstate or overpromise and then get into trouble.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I have one
I
more
think we can
question.
say, without promising anything, that we would really, really like to have something to show when the two big events or the major events this fall is going, like EclipseCon Europe and an Oracle Code one. We would really, really like to have something to show there.
Okay, got it.
So, but it's kind of out of our control right now.
Yeah.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thanks, Ivar.
Menai,
I have one. Sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I have one more question about the yes, the connection to the Eclipse IDE. In the past, we had the Glassfish tools, and now with Jakarta EE 8, or let's say also Java EE 8, how far or how much have you focused on this, and what's the plans about the Eclipse IDE? Will it be like, I mean, I think that the community expects from you, us, that we have something implemented that works perfectly, since Eclipse Glassfish and Jakarta is now, and the Eclipse IDE is all in one hand now. So what's the plans there?
So first and foremost, the Eclipse Foundation is a place where open source development works. And the Eclipse Foundation does not actually employ any of the developers. Ultimately, what the Eclipse IDE projects decide to do is really up to them, and the amount of energy that comes to the community to assist them in that sort of activity. So this is sort of a non-answer. But so we do not include, the Eclipse IDE is not included in any of our current plans around Jakarta EE. There is an Eclipse Glassfish tools project that has been created, and the Glassfish tools content, I believe, has been transferred to that project. And I would invite members of the community that are interested in working on that content to investigate that project and contribute.
Okay, I'm interested in contribute to this project, but then I will have to go through the